Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to an entry which I'm a little bit late to, as Hurricane Milton had put a delay on me getting out to actually see this film, which is for Terrifier 3, which was just recently released to much anticipation and even much more success. If you've been with my channel for a while, you may have seen my Terrifier 1 and 2 videos. If not, I will link to both at the end, so be sure to stick around for those. But basically, what these films are known most for is Art the Clown, very creepy, and being very gory and intense, making some people very sick to where they even walk out of them. Now, in my previous videos about Terrifier, I focused on if there's more to these films than simple gore and shock value, which, spoiler alert if you haven't seen those two videos of mine, there is. In those first two films, they did a really great job of balancing the story with the scares and with the gore. Honestly, my only complaint as I revisited part 2 was that it is a little bit long, running at about 2 hours and 18 minutes. A little bit longer than that sweet spot that's usually no more than 80 to 100 minutes, but there isn't really much that could have been cut out of part 2. They'd really laid the groundwork for a lot, they really built the story out a lot, added this supernatural aspect. Maybe you could cut 10 seconds here and there from certain scenes, but what are you going to save, 3 minutes maybe by the end of it? Really not worth it. But that was my only issue. But now the question is there even a reason for part 3? Is it balanced? Is it interesting? Is it worth even going out to the theater to see this? Well, before we dive in, as a reminder, I will begin this video as non-spoiler, a little bit vanilla, just some simple info on the top layer about what to expect should you decide to check this out. And then later on in the video, I will put up this banner here to let you know that I'm about to go into some more detail, which may, have some spoilers. So, let's begin with the synopsis for this newest installment here, which is as follows. Art the Clown is set to unleash chaos on the unsuspecting residents of Miles County as they peacefully drift off to sleep on Christmas Eve. Now that is a bit simple there, but for some more info, we're picking up roughly 5 years after, 5 years after part 2 with the survivors of that film, Sienna and her younger brother Jonathan, as the holidays are approaching. Sienna is getting out of a mental health facility and is having severe PTSD due to the events she had survived in the previous film. Now her brother is in college, he's kind of quiet, slowly starting to get to know people, and he's been through quite a lot, just like Sienna, if you recall, and some of the locals have even been kind of following this case about these survivors. And while Sienna is visiting town after getting out of the mental health facility and visiting their aunt, she's been in touch with him, and she's not really doing that well. She's having some, her ups and downs, and she's having some hallucinations and some panic attacks and starting to kind of see Art, everywhere that she looks. And then we're kind of alternating between stuff about Art and his little new sidekick in a way, and kind of him getting back to the dead and slowly working his way into wreaking havoc in this town and getting towards these two survivors. Now, they had built off the supernatural aspects of the second film quite a bit. They kind of fleshed things out a bit more. Why and how he's coming back, what that little girl is in part 2, or this other demonic stuff that's happening. Basically, everything that's kind of been coming to the forefront about Art. Now, what I think this film really does well is that continuation. This definitely feels like a directly connected sequel rather than anything which is just rehashing a lot of what came before and putting a new skin on a similar story. And as the film is kind of working us towards being wrapped up, it's obvious that they're building up to a part 4, and from what I've read, this is going to be the end of the franchise with part 4. So, the big question is, what about the gore? Is it worse than part 2, such as that bedroom scene, if you'll remember that one? I'd read that there was a premiere in London where some people were walking out during the first 10 minutes getting really sick to their stomach. And it actually had me concerned that maybe the filmmakers would be more interested in just kind of upping that gore to a point where maybe the film itself would suffer, that it would be just too much gore and kind of a lame story. Well, I got through that first 10 minutes, no real issues, and then the next 10, and so on, and no big deal. There was worse stuff from that first 10 minutes. There was worse stuff in parts 1 and 2, actually. So I could only think that maybe these attendees hadn't ever seen the first 2. Maybe they're not even into horror that much in the first place, and instead we're just wanting to see this new popular horror film that they'd heard stuff about, but weren't actually fans of the franchise or the genre in general. Perhaps. That's just my guess, because it really wasn't that bad in my opinion. Now, as the rest of this film does unfold, we definitely have some extremely violent scenes of the kind that we're used to, as we're used to seeing in these films. But for me, I really feel like part 2 was a little bit worse, but it's subjective. For example, in part 2, the bedroom scene, we have acts involving scissors and scalpels, bleach and salt, breaking and ripping off of limbs, and of course the mocking. The scene in particular really hit me hard, something about the scissors and the scalpels specifically, because I've been accidentally cut with both, and know what a small cut can feel like if you get bleach into it or salt into it. So it leads me to kind of imagine what they did with the scene as far as the extent that this character is going through, what that pain would feel like. Being familiar with a tiny bit of it and just imagining what a massive amount of that would feel like. Rather than something that I don't have experience, such as, take something like a chainsaw. In the case of Terrifier 3, it's quick, it's mechanical, it's devastating, but where even in a severely gross scene, it seems like I'm a little bit removed from that. Unlike scissors or a blade or like a razor, like a box cutter maybe, I've never been injured with a chainsaw, so I am a bit more removed, if any of that makes any sense, because it's brutal, absolutely. It's over-the-top gore, really over-the-top gore, and it also has the mocking and teasing, and there's one body part where, well, let's just say it's extremely rough. But in my opinion, the bedroom scene in part 2 was worse. So if you were able to handle that, you'll be able to handle part 3. But all in all, I will just sum up the quick, layer on top here is to say, before we go into any spoilers, is that if you could handle part 1 and 2, you can handle this one easily. It expands from that second one and leads, directly into this bigger story, and then ends trying to push us into a part 4 in a very interesting way. And I can't wait to see what they do with that. We get more supernatural aspects kind of along with this. That's kind of pumped up a bit more. And this does not seem like a little $2 million movie. They really use that money well. The production value is high. I honestly don't know how they were able to pull this one off. All of that makes it more than worth checking out in the theater as part of celebrating the Halloween season. Or if you can't make it out, it should be on streaming or rental, not too long from now. Okay, now that all that's wrapped up, some quick details to touch on what may be a bit spoilery. So here's your warning. Feel free to pick this video up after you've seen the film, or if you aren't concerned about any spoilers, let's just continue. So let's talk about Vicky. Talk about how sick she is. She's really disgusting, but also bringing a voice to the acts that are being done was definitely creepy, especially towards the end as Sienna's tied up. That whole thing was just gross. That weird demon thing happening, the lights in her eyes, simply gross. And I'm still kind of missing that little girl from the second one because she did a great job in that, but this Vicky is a great replacement to kind of working with art on some of this. And that discovery of her in the tub with all of that black ooze, that actually grossed me out a lot more than some of the other stuff in the movie. But the big one here is that shower scene. I actually had somebody just comment on something I put on social media asking them about it, and they brought up this shower scene with the chainsaw. Like I said, it was easier for me to take a chainsaw than a scalpel and scissors, and that bleach and salt and everything in part 2, but it was pretty intense as well, especially with when Cole, Jonathan's roommate, is getting kind of rear-ended and all the details that are coming with all of that. While I couldn't feel that chainsaw the way I would feel a scalpel or something in part 2, the extent to which art is going with this, he did, everything was great. It was some really messed up stuff that worked with the scene and was really disgusting and was pretty original because it didn't seem like anything he'd done in the first 2 films. Now, I am really interested to kind of see what they're going to do with part 4, with Jonathan being out of the picture and whatever's going to happen with Gabby being in, I guess, hell or something along those lines. They're down to just our final girl, Sienna, and this trip to the underworld, it seems. So I'm guessing they are really planning something big, and I can't wait to see that. But this should be, great, and like a great way to end it. And personally, I'm kind of happy that they're ending it. Not that I want it to be done so much as I don't want the franchise to be run to the ground. But let me take down that banner, and with that, I just I've checked out several franchises you've seen on my channel over the years, and there are some entries which aren't just not as good as others, but there are entries in almost every franchise that I just wouldn't ever be up to revisiting. Like Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Scream, and especially Hellraiser, they all have entries which I just don't care to ever revisit. Now, if they wrap up the Terrifier franchise with another solid entry along the lines of Part 3, this will definitely be one of my top franchises, because I would get 4 solid movies that all work well, that I'm able to rewatch and really enjoy, with the only real issue being that Part 2 is a little bit long, and, you know, the gore is over the top, so you definitely have to be in the mood for something quite that shocking. But at any rate, this one was great. It's great to get out to the theater, and is more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out my entry here for Terrifier 3. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon if you haven't already to get notified for when I put up new content, which is typically 1 to 3 times a week. Check out some of my back catalog, like these supercuts that I've been putting up, where I've taken some older content and made one big entry you can put on. And I'll, and be on the lookout for some of the new stuff that I have coming up soon. And I will see you in the next one.